Welcome to CarePortal Training Session number 2, where we're going to pick up where we left off with Training Session number 1 with patient Johnny Medicare. Now, before we actually begin the training session, I'm going to give you an overview of the items we're going to cover in this session. The first block of items that we'll cover relate to the clinical processing flow for a start of care for patient Johnny Medicare. And though we had shown how to process the RAP for Johnny Medicare in the first training session, we're going to back up and assume that the point of care worker Randy has just now completed the start of care in the point of care and has not yet submitted it to the back office. Randy's going to review the 45 and he's going to decide to change the initial PT orders. He'll then submit the start of care to the back office without signing the 45. And the reason for that is because he anticipates that the therapist is going to make some PT orders changes while completing the PT eval. At this point, the point of care PT user, Susie Anaya, is going to complete the PT eval. She's going to sign and submit it to the back office so that then the orders then become part of the 45. Back office user Johnny Worker is going to find the start of care in documents owned by office. He's going to review it and he's going to return it back to Randy in the point of care to complete the medications. Randy is then going to find the start of care in his open documents and is going to complete the medications. And then he'll sign the 45 and submit the start of care to the back office. This will cause the RN sign date to be automatically registered in the tracking for that 45. Then, in the back office, user Johnny Worker is going to validate the start of care. And we'll scroll down just a bit here. So the point of care user Randy is going to find the validated start of care for patient Johnny Medicare in My Submitted Documents, and will sign both the 45 and the comprehensive assessment. We understand that different agencies work differently and have different protocols. In this particular demonstration, we're going to assume that the 45 doesn't have to be signed before the RAP is processed, but some agencies prefer that the 45 be signed by the clinician before the RAP is processed. So let us know which way you'd like that to be, and we'll configure that for you. Next, the back office user Johnny Walker is going to export the assessment for the OASIS batch transmission to the state. And again, some agencies prefer to block the RAP from being processed until the assessment has been batched to send to the state. Others will be okay with going ahead and doing the RAP even before that assessment has been transmitted. So again, please let us know what your preferences are and we'll be glad to set them accordingly. Next, Johnny Walker is going to use the Claims to be Billed form in the billing module to submit the RAP to Medicare. After the RAP is processed, then we're going to look into how to complete visit notes for within the episode for the same patient. So point of care user Randy is going to find the 1219 SN visit in his worker calendar. He's going to use that to complete the CarePortal SN visit note for that date. Randy will then sign and submit the skilled nursing note to the back office. Then back office user Johnny Worker is going to review that note in the back office and send it back to Randy to make changes. Randy will then be required to unsign or amend the signed visit note to make changes before making changes, and then we'll sign and submit it to the back office. Now, back office user Johnny Walker is going to open the 1219 skilled nursing note in clinical and will confirm it for billing. There's different ways this can be done, one in clinical and one in workflow, and we'll cover both of those. Then it's determined that the remaining visits, the next 2 visits for this patient on 1221 and 1224, are not to be done by user Randy, but by user Michael Tidd, who's an LVN. So we're going to reassign those visits from Randy to Michael Tidd, and let's assume that he does not have a point of care device, because in some situations, not every user does have a point of care device. So we'll show you how to go ahead and complete time cards for those visits without having to put the full clinical information into the system. We'll then enter a discharge assessment for patient Johnny Medicare. We'll put in the full OASIS assessment, and we'll validate that after it's submitted to the back office, and that will cause the patient's status to change to discharged. And then we'll go ahead and process the final claim for this patient. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start at the top. Now, as we saw from the outline, we're going to be jumping back and forth between point of care and back office. So I just want to make it clear what I'm doing here. I'm going to log in as Randy in the point of care. And the first item on our list was to go back to the start of care that had been entered in the first training session. And we're going to make some edits to that. Now, to do that, we can go to My Open Documents. If the start of care assessment or any visit has not yet been submitted to the back office or has been returned, it will show up in My Open Documents. So I click My Open Documents and I choose the start of care for patient Johnny Medicare. And at this point, I would like to bring up the 45, so I go into View Docs. And I can either print my full start of care or my 45. In this case, I'm interested in the 45. And I'm going to zoom in a bit here. And I see that the physical therapy is 1 time a week for 9 weeks. Take the patient to the gym and whatever. And I determined this is not correct. I need to put in my initial orders, PT to eval and assess. So I decide as Randy, point of care user Randy, that I'm going to go in and make changes to this start of care order set. I'm going to return. Now I could click Next to go into the full start of care assessment and then navigate over to the end of the assessment. But there's a shortcut I can use to accomplish the same thing. And that is to go into this tab here, the 45 info button. I select that and it's going to give me a list of different places I can jump to directly within the assessment. All right, so I'm going to go to the orders care plan for this patient. And it's going to bring up by default skilled nursing, but I can change to PT simply by selecting on the PT discipline in the disciplines tab. Now, if I want, I could go to problems, and let's go ahead and delete this problem and put a more generic one in for the initial orders. I delete that. If I want to search for particular problems or particular categories of interventions and goals, I can put my cursor in this blank box here. It was not blank originally, but I clicked it and it became blank. And so I can type in perhaps orders. And I find here physical therapy order only. And then in my goals tab, I can choose for physical therapy evaluation and treatment as indicated. In my interventions, accordingly, I can choose treatment will be provided per therapy care plan. So then if I go over to my care plan and orders, I can see what that's going to look like. Here's my physical therapy interventions and my goals. All right, so I'm going to return and click back. And again, I can go ahead and go into View Docs to view the changes that I've made for my 45. And I'll zoom in, and I'll see that this is a more appropriate intervention and goal set for physical therapy. All right, I'm going to X out of that and return. Now, so far we've arrived at this point in the list. Randy has reviewed the 45 and changed the initial PT orders. Now he's going to submit the start of care to the back office without signing the 45. And I see there are some inconsistencies, but none of them fatal, so I'm going to scroll past those and click OK to go ahead and submit this assessment to the back office. I see a couple more warnings that the respiration and weight have not yet been entered but I'm going to go ahead and submit in any case. And it tells me that the document was successfully submitted to the back office. Now at this point, Randy is going to be out of the picture for a bit while we focus in on Susie Anaya, who's going to log in as a PT user, and she's going to do a PT eval. So let's return to another window that I have open, and let's assume this is also in a point of care device. We're going to log in as Susie Anaya. And she's going to go to her schedule, either list view or calendar view. Let's take a look at the calendar view. And we see that on the 20th, there's an unfulfilled scheduled visit for Medicare. It says this is the first visit and there's no eval been done yet. So if we click on that, that will allow us to launch into the PT eval by clicking on Note, because the eval is implemented as a note, not an OASIS assessment. So we'll click on Note. We'll choose the note name, which in this case is going to be a CarePortal PT evaluation. If I wanted to change the time, I could go ahead and do that here. Let's go ahead and just change this to 2 o'clock. Or let's do 3 o'clock actually. Set that time. And by default, it goes for 45 minutes. But you could change that to perhaps 1 hour by changing it to 4 o'clock and clicking OK. And let's go ahead and click Next to go in and actually choose the HCPCS code first. This is a maintenance. This is either a service of PT or a maintenance visit. So I'm going to choose service of PT for my billing purposes. And click Next. Choose my homebound status. Let's say the onset date was the 5th. I'm going to rifle through these as quickly as possible. Notice here that I can choose applies to all below. If I choose, for example, moderate, then all of them will be chosen as moderate, or 0 dependent, then all will be dependent. Although if I choose another option within any of these rows, then you'll see this will disappear so that it does not apply to all below. I'm just going to choose applies to all below for most of these. Notice it tells me I have a score for my Tinetti gait and balance test of 11. Less than 19 is a high risk of falling, so I'll choose that. Timed up and go, 10 seconds. 10 to 19 seconds, typical mobility. Time to sit and stand test. Shows 15. Repetitions for sit to stand without UE support. Now at this point I can go ahead and fill out my physical therapy orders to indicate, for example, arthritis as a problem. And I can put in my goals and my interventions for arthritis. So I can just click whichever ones I prefer. And we're going to go ahead and click Next to take us to the next item in the sequence, therapeutic exercises. And I can add as many as I wish to this. I'm going to go ahead and click Finish to complete the PT evaluation. Having completed the PT evaluation, we're going to have PT user Susie Anaya sign and submit this to the back office. So we're going to click Sign/Submit. Allows us to review the details. Click OK. It will bring up a PDF representation of that document, 4-page document. And so once we're done reviewing it, and if we're happy with what we see, we can go ahead and click Sign as Susie Anaya, PT. Press OK to sign the document. It says the document was successfully signed and submitted to the back office. So at this point, we're going to go to Johnny Worker in the back office, and he will be able to see that start of care that Randy had submitted. He's going to make a suggestion to make a couple of changes. So let's go ahead and log in as user Johnny Worker. And we'll go to Clinical. Instead of selecting the actual patient, maybe Johnny Worker does not know the patients who need to be reviewed, so he's going to click on Documents on My Office to see what has recently come in and has not yet been addressed. All right, so I do see the Medicare, Johnny Medicare assessment, start of care assessment. And I'm going to click on that, and this will allow me to review it. So I can go ahead and click Print. And this will bring up the full start of care assessment for Johnny Medicare. I can review this as a back office QA person. And if I'm happy with what I see, I can go ahead and validate it. But if I'm not happy with what I see, which in this case I'm not because I see that not enough medications have been entered, I can return control to the point of care user by clicking on this checkbox, Owned by Remote User. And this will cause a hot list message to be sent back to the point of care user, unless I check this checkbox, which will cause the message to be suppressed. Now, if I keep that unchecked and I say, missing medications, please complete the medications and sign submit. So I'm giving him permission that once he's entered the medications, he can go ahead and sign it and submit it. I can also mark this as urgent so it shows up directly in his face in the point of care. So I click Save and Exit. And so at this point, I've done my job in the back office by sending that assessment back to the point of care user, Randy. And now I'm going to switch hats again and come back in as point of care user, Randy. I'm still in the system as Randy. Notice if I do anything, it's going to automatically pop up in my face to say that I need to complete the medications for Johnny Worker. So in this situation where you know it's been returned back to you for corrections, you can find that document in My Open Documents. So there it is, Johnny Medicare. I can go ahead and click on that. Now, at this point, I could go ahead and click Next to go into the assessment and click Navigate and find the medications list in the navigation list. But again, I can bypass all of that by going into the 45 Info tab, choosing Medications, and let's just add one more medication. By the way, in a situation like this, you would not want to add the medication to the patient medication, the current medication list for the patient. You would want to put it in the start of care itself, because if you put it in the current medications, it doesn't retroactively flow back into the start of care. So this is the recommended way of doing this. Go ahead and click New Entry, and we'll choose something like Phenergan. And it automatically chooses the route and the strength for us. We'll put in the date, put in a quantity, and so we're done adding that medication, and let's say we're done with the entire list. If we wanted to, we could check the drug interactions. In order to check the drug interactions, you would just check that, click that button, and it would tell you on the screen if there were any interactions found. In this case, there were none. So we go back and we work our way back to the assessment, the initial assessment form. All right, at this point, we're going to go ahead and submit the document back to the back office, and then we'll sign the 485. So we'll follow the same process we had followed earlier, and click OK, and submit. And it's been submitted to the back office. Now we'll go ahead and sign the 485. Sign as Randy Drawn. And we'll click back. And notice now it is no longer editable because not only has it been submitted to the back office, but it's also been signed. Picking up where we left off on our list, we submitted the 485 to the back office. Now we'll return to the back office as user Johnny Worker. In clinical, and we're going to go to Documents Owned by Office again, and we find Johnny Medicare, the skilled nursing start of care assessment in the list. So we choose this, and we notice that it has not yet been validated. The status is complete rather than validated. And so let's go ahead and validate this. The purpose of validating it is to lock it down and make sure that it's available to be submitted to the or transmitted to the state, and then wrapped after submitting it to the state. So we'll go ahead and validate it. And it just gives us a couple of warnings, and these are not actual errors that are preventing the validation from completing. So we'll return to our assessment, and we see that now the status is validated, meaning that it's ready to be wrapped and sent to the state. Now we're going to go back again to point of care user Randy. So he's in the system again looking for what he needs to do, and he finds in his main menu his opened or his submitted documents in a list view. And he sees there's his validated assessment for Johnny Medicare, and once it's validated, it's now eligible to be signed. And notice the U there indicates it has not yet been signed, as opposed to the S for signed. So I'm going into that assessment again, And I'm going to go ahead and assign the assessment. So I review the full start of care assessment, and I determine that it meets my approval. So I sign as Randy Drawn. I click to sign the document. It says it was successfully signed. I click back, and I'm done with my part of that assessment. Now at this point, we're going to go back to the back office and submit that assessment to the state. In order to do that, as Johnny Worker has logged in to the back office, he then goes to Workflow, and he can select Create Batches from the OASIS Batches menu. He selects all dates. You can see all of those assessments that have been validated and are ready to go out. This is quite a list. In this case, I could click Select All, and that would select them all for me, so that then I could click Save and Generate to create the whole entire batch with all of those assessments in it. But let's say that I just wanted to select the ones for the last 30 days. And that allows me to pick up just Johnny Medicare. So I'm going to choose Johnny Medicare, and I'm going to click Save and Generate. And that's going to allow me to save this text file to whatever location I prefer. I can click Save, or I can say Save As. And I can specify where I want that to be sent. Let's say, for example, that I wanted it to go to an OASIS folder. So I go to my C drive, and I don't have an OASIS folder here yet, so I right-click anywhere here in the window and click with my left mouse button New Folder. We're going to call this OASIS Batches. All right, I choose OASIS Batches, and this is something you have to do only once to set up your folder to send it to. And then you go ahead and keep the file name as it is and click Save. And then later on, when you want to submit the OASIS batch to the state, you would just open it in that folder. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and click back to take me back out of this context. And the next step is going to be to go ahead and use claims to be billed to send the wrap to Medicare. So now we'll go to Billing. In order to submit this wrap to Medicare, we're going to go ahead and click Claims to be billed and all dates. This will show us all episodes that are ready to go out, whether for wraps or finals or commercial insurance. And let's limit our claim type to just the wraps at this point. And we're going to display errors and warnings, see if there's anything that we need to take care of before we send this off. And we scroll down and we see our patient Johnny Medicare, 0 errors and 1 warning. If we want to see what the warning is, we can click on that. It tells us that Medicare eligibility has not been checked. This is a fake patient, so we obviously can't check the Medicare eligibility. So we're going to just ignore that warning. It's only a warning. It won't prevent the claim from being processed. So we'll check this checkbox to specify that that claim is going to go out. And then when we're ready, we can click View Medicare Claims to see the UB04 representation of that claim, or we could go straight to Submit Medicare Claims. I'm just going to do that in the interest of time, Submit Medicare Claims. All right, and once it's completed the processing and sending the claim off to Medicare, it will tell us that the Medicare claims were successfully submitted. And it tells me to see the claim list at the top of the page. And so I see here that I've got a claim or a claim batch with 1 claim in that batch. It tells me the HERG total and the bill total and how much the balance is due. Now later on, if I want to see the 999 file status, I can click on Refresh Claim Responses and Payments from Payers, and that will go and retrieve any 999 files, and it will update the status here to tell me if it was accepted or rejected. And it will also pull any ERA payments that have been processed for that claim batch, and then we'll update the total here. Typically, it can take several minutes to several hours for that 999 file status to come back. I'll go ahead and click refresh now and see if anything comes up, but I'm doubtful it will already be available. Well, it actually succeeded, and the 999 file status came back as accepted. So we've completed the submission process, and we have confidence that the 999 file status is accepted. Now, if I want to see details of this claim batch, I can go ahead and click anywhere on this line. That will take me and show me all of the claims that were part of that batch. In this case, there was only one. All right, I can also process non-Medicare claims using this button. We'll show you that in a subsequent training session. The remittance advice log will show us claims that have been paid and how much they were paid. We can also retrieve payer reports to see the 277 files and ERA files. We'll just go ahead and show the list. Now, these are just raw files. They're not formatted for human readability, but if you need to download these for whatever reason, for example, your ERA files, to pull them into PC Print to see them in a friendly format, you can just right-click on any of these and say Save Target As and download them to whatever location you prefer on your computer. Now, we do have a report called the Claim Response Log report, which will show the results of your 277 files, and that will be in, I'll show you in just one second. If you go to Reports and you go to Financial Grids, you scroll down to Claim Batch Log, or Claim Response Log. You can enter a date range and continue, and then click Apply Filter. And that will show you the claims that have been received, along with their status, whether they're accepted or rejected, and the total amounts that were paid, or that were expected to be paid. If you do see a rejection for whatever reason, then it's good to pay attention to the codes that show up in these columns here, and there will be instructions to tell you how to interpret those codes. All right, so let's return to our list. We've submitted the claim to Medicare, the RAP. Now we'll go back to clinical and illustrate the processing flow for visit notes this time instead of OASIS assessments. We'll start by going into Randy's point of care login, and he'll find the 12/19 skilled nursing visit in his worker calendar, and he'll complete that visit and sign and submit it to the back office. So let's go ahead and choose the point of care main menu here. He's going to go to My Schedule, Calendar View. And he will find the Johnny Medicare scheduled visit for December 19th, and he'll click on that. He'll choose to do the note. It says also there's a comment here you'll notice says beware of the dog, and that was put in the back office in the schedule refiner. So that's a way to communicate messages to the point of care user for any given visit note that's been scheduled. I'll click Note. We'll choose CarePortal SN Visit Note. We'll choose a HCPCS code, Direct Skilled Services. We'll click Next. And here we can choose what type of visit it is, whether it's a regular visit note or regular including HHA supervisory or LPN supervisory. And depending on which type we choose, then it will ask us particular questions related to, for example, LPN supervisory if I choose that. I can skip over those questions if I simply choose regular. I'll go ahead and enter the vital signs. And notice some of the questions do carry forward from one to the next, for example, the weight and the height. Homebound status needs to be specified each time. Here's a question that can help save some time, depending on your agency protocols. If you would like to allow your nurses to skip over certain systems that the nurse knows are within normal limits or has reviewed and found them to be within normal limits, if you check any of these options, those particular systems will be skipped. And so we won't have to complete the entire note. Let's just do a couple of these, perhaps. Let's do sensory, and we'll do pain and medication review, and perhaps we'll leave care coordination there in place. But the rest of these we're going to skip over because they are within normal limits. Click next, and we'll answer the sensory questions. And known diabetic is no. Drug regimen review. And so we can just choose which items apply here. Let's choose no for that. And presence of pain, we'll say yes. That will take us to our pain assessment, which carries forward, and I can change the values if I wish. And we also have an intervention log that will allow us to document which the skilled nursing interventions that have been ordered for this particular patient. If I choose performed, or if I unselect performed and leave this blank, and maybe I type in some narrative here. If I leave this blank and click next, it's not going to let me go forward. I'm going to have to choose a reason that no action was taken. Perhaps the patient was in pain, or perhaps I did go ahead and perform that action. And I'm going to skip the OASIS tracking sheet, although I do highly recommend doing that so you can track things that have occurred during events that have occurred during the patient's episode. Service journal supplies allows us to put in any number of supplies and the quantity and the date. We'll go ahead and save that, and you can add as many supplies as you wish. Cumulative flow sheet, we'll do no. And so that brings us to the end of our skilled nursing note. Now if I'd like, I can go ahead and sign and submit it at this point. So I'm going to do that. And it gives me a chance to view the details, the start and end times. I'll click OK, and then it's going to bring up the actual document representation. And if I review that, and if I like what I see, then I'm going to go ahead and click Sign as Randy Drawn. And I click back, and that's been both signed and submitted to the back office. So I can no longer make changes to it at this point. But now what happens if there is a problem with it and changes do need to be made? Well, user Johnny Worker in the back office, again, using the same process we showed earlier, can go at any time into documents owned by Office and can see any visits that have been entered into the system. And it looks like here's one that came in for Johnny Medicare from Randy Drawn. It has been signed, but perhaps I'd like to review that before I actually mark it as confirmed for billing. So notice here that the confirmed status is no. Confirmed is a term that we use that simply means that it's ready to be billed. If it's not been confirmed, then it cannot be billed. So somebody in the back office, once the note is submitted, is going to need to click confirm to make that ready for billing. But before doing that, the back office QA staff may want to print this onto the screen, and they may review that and say, okay, well, I happen to know this patient does not use glasses, so this is incorrect. So under sensory vision, we need to tell Randy to change that. So what we can do is send this back to the remote user by clicking on the to remote. Sensory status problem. Get that spelled right. Patient does not use glasses. And I mark that as urgent. I exit. And so let's go back to user Randy Drawn. And I see again an urgent message indicating that I need to make a change to this visit note. So I'm going to close that and go to My Open Documents. I'm going to find that SN visit. And at this point, it tells me this note may not be edited because it is signed. So what I have to do before I can make any changes to it is to unsign it. Although I will explain the terminology, there is a difference between unsign and amend. An amendment is sort of like unsigning it, except that it doesn't destroy all versions of the visit note. In other words, every time you sign a visit note, CarePortal allows you to keep a history or a version of each of those signed notes. And if you unsign it, it will destroy all the history. If you amend it, it will just roll back the latest version and will open it up so that you can then make changes to it while keeping a copy of each of the signed notes for that particular visit note. So the best option typically is to amend it, and not every user has the unsigned option available. Most users do not have that option except for super users. So let's go ahead and click amend. And this will create a new copy of the document that you can edit. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now at this point I can click Next because I've opened it up for editing. I can navigate and let's find the sensory status, vision. And I'm going to uncheck Use Glasses and we'll just say the patient is normal. Then we can click Save Exit. Are you sure? Yes. And if I want, I can reprint that to review it. Or I can just go ahead and sign Submit again to the back office. I review the PDF and I click Sign as Randy Drawn. Press OK. It's successfully signed and sent to the back office. We've signed and submitted that to the back office. And so now user Johnny Walker in the back office will then be able to see that in the submitted documents list, or those that are owned by the office. And we'll see this note, and it has not been confirmed yet. So at this point, the user can then confirm the visit, and that will then be ready for billing. Now, instead of confirming it here, which I could easily do, I want to show you another location where notes can be confirmed in batch mode so that you can see all the notes that have come in and then just confirm them all at once. So let's go back here and go to Workflow. And there's an option here called Unconfirmed Visits that will give me a way to select a date range. And I'm just going to choose the default going back to 12/12 through 12/26. Apply filters. I can see all the visit notes or documents that have been turned in but have not yet confirmed, and I can just check them off as having been confirmed. And I click Save to complete my operation. Now at this point then I have no visits in my list that have not yet been confirmed. Now, let's say we have a nurse or a LPN or LVN, Michael Tidd, to whom we wish to assign some of these visits, but this nurse does not have a point of care device. Well, we can go ahead and put in the time cards based on the scheduled visits by going to the calendar, the master scheduling calendar, in the back office. If I go to scheduling here, it will bring up the month of December, the current month, or I can change the month if I wish. Now, if I know that my patient, this will show me all patients and all workers for the entire agency, and that can be overwhelming if you don't zero it or narrow it down to a more manageable scale. You can do that by using any of these filters, by worker or by patient. So let's say that we have patient Johnny Medicare in mind. So we scroll down to Medicare, select just that patient. Then we see for the 21st that there's a scheduled visit that's been assigned to Randy Drawn. But let's say we want to reassign that to Michael Tidd, so we click on that, and we assign the scheduled visit to a different worker, Michael Tidd. Notice also that there's some numbers in this list. The numbers indicate how many points or how many visits and the weight of each visit. If it's an admission visit, it's weighted a higher scale than just a regular routine visit. So you can get a sort of an idea of the workload of each of your workers and then assign accordingly based on how much workload each of those workers has. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and assign the visit to Michael Tidd. And this is going to be a routine visit. And I don't need to actually change the time. I can just leave the time and date as it is. All I needed to do at this point was to reassign the worker to Michael Tidd. And I could save just the scheduled portion to show you on the calendar that it's now been changed from Randy Drawn to Michael Tidd. If I wanted also, I could move this from the 21st to the 22nd or any period within this week. If I click on this little arrow once, and then I move over and click on the other cell for the 22nd, and that effectively moves it over. Now, at this point, all I have done now is modified the actual schedule. I have not modified the time card, or I've not entered the time card. So if I want to put in the time card information as to when the visit was actually performed, I can go over to here on my actual side. This again was my scheduled side on the left. The actual visit is on the right. So I can change this. I don't even have to use the same date. I can choose to make this on the 21st or the 20th, anytime within the same calendar week on which the scheduled visit occurred. But we'll keep the date here the same. We'll just change the time to something like 10 a.m. 00 a.m. And to accept that, we just go ahead and choose the same date again. Once we click on that, it's going to set the date and time. Now, if I want, I can change the end time as well, but I'm just going to leave that as it is. I'm going to say this is the maybe perhaps a train and educate visit for billing purposes. So once I've made the desired changes, I can click Save Scheduled and Actual. And notice now it's removed from my list for my calendar, because my calendar by default only shows me the scheduled visits, not the ones that have been completed. If I want to see the completed ones, I go to Actual Events, and that shows me that on the 22nd I have Michael Tidd, LVN, who performed that visit. Now, if I want to go back to my scheduled events, I can see that there's another visit note that was due for the 24th. I can do the same thing and assign that to Michael Tidd. Let me, instead of doing this, show an alternative way of doing the same thing in Clinical. So I'm going to back out of my calendar here, click back to main page, and if I go to Clinical, and if I happen to already be in the patient in Clinical, then it's more convenient rather than going out to the calendar to perform the same operation in Clinical. In order to do that, I can go to Assessments and Visits, and I can see Patient Scheduled Visits. It's going to show me a list of the visits that have been scheduled for this patient. Right, so I see here for Randy Drawn, this visit has been assigned for the 24th. And again, if I wanted this to be for Michael Tidd instead of Randy Drawn, I could go into Note, and I could change the assessor. It was originally scheduled for Michael Tidd, but the actual person doing the visit is going to be Michael Tidd. And we'll say that this is, instead of a full CarePortal SN visit note where I would have to fill in all the systems, I can simply do a time card version of the same thing. And click time card for SN visit, and choose my HCPCS code. And then I could go next. And the only question in this entire visit note is just the additional comments and findings. And I could say, visit performed and paperwork received. Now, the advantage of using this approach as opposed to the calendar is that you can put in notes like this to indicate what actually had been done. And let's go ahead and click finish. And let's confirm that. Save, exit. And so we're done with that visit. It's confirmed and ready to be billed. If I want to see the actual documents that have been completed for this patient, I can go to Documents Owned by Office. I can see that we've got a CarePortal SN visit, a PT eval, a confirmed SN visit for Michael Tidd, and another one for Michael Tidd on the 24th. Now, the reason why I don't see the start of care is because by default it suppresses the transmitted assessments from showing. So if I wanted to see transmitted ones, I could go ahead and click on that. That will show me all of the assessments, whether they've been transmitted or not, assessments and visit notes. Later on, once you've billed the visits and the assessments, they will no longer show in this list unless you choose explicitly to show the unbilled ones, the ones that have not yet been billed or signed. If I wish, I could also see a list of all the documents for the patient, whether the documents are in the back office or in the point of care. If I go to View Docs, it will show me all visits and all documents for all time. It will tell me if it's incomplete or complete, or whether it's just a time card with a T. S means it's been submitted to the back office. If it were O, it would mean it was still open in the point of care. I could also see the grouper summary to tell me what the reimbursement amount is expected to be for Medicare wraps and final claims. So I can see the HERG amount and the weight and the calculations for what the total payment is expected to be. I could also, if I wish, attach, for example, to this time card assessment, I could attach a paper document that had been scanned. If I just click on this, I can then choose to browse and then upload the scanned document, and that will be attached to this time card for documentation purposes. Now we've moved from clinical processing for the visit notes to entering a discharge assessment for the same patient. So let's say this patient, the patient's goals had already been met, and we're going to go ahead and take advantage of one of these scheduled visits to go ahead and enter a discharge assessment for the patient. So let's go back in as Randy Drawn, and in the point of care, we're going to go to My Schedule Calendar View, and we see a visit here for Johnny Medicare that has been assigned, and let's say today's the date of the discharge. So we click on that, and we, instead of choosing a note, we're going to do a full discharge OASIS. So we click Assessment, and we choose 9, Discharge from Agency, not to an inpatient facility. If we wish, we could do a supplemental order at the same time as we do the discharge assessment. The same is true for a resumption of care or a transfer or any other type of assessment. You can choose a plan type, or you can leave it blank if you don't intend to create a supplemental order or a 45 along with that document. Now, let's say that we had not actually been able to do a visit because the patient was not available, and we just wanted to document the fact that this patient is being discharged. Well, we could change the transaction code from the discharge visit code to a documentation only code, which would indicate that this visit is not a true visit. It's just a document that we're entering into the system. So let's go ahead and click Next to complete this OASIS assessment, this discharge assessment for the patient. And we'll go ahead and fill out the various options. Choose. Also, it will tell you if they're at the end of the episode whether an influenza vaccination had been performed based on your previous responses. So it is worthwhile to go ahead and fill in your vaccinations with each OASIS assessment that you perform. A number of these carry forward from your previous questions, but you can modify them as needed. If I want to document my wounds, I can click New Entry and put a new wound in, or I can mark them as healed. If I want, I can just put in a healed date of today. In the intervention synopsis for M2400, you might want to check the chart review to see what items had occurred relative to the tracking, the OASIS-C tracking over time to see what had happened. So we see there was drug monitoring, med intervention, new fall or fall risk, and so forth. So you can refer to this chart to guide you as you complete these options here. Date of last visit will be the actual discharge date or the used as your bill to date when you're processing your claims. Here's an important question. Do you wish to complete a discharge summary? If you'd like to create a document along with your discharge OASIS that you can then send off to the physician as a discharge summary, then you can choose yes to this and answer the ensuing questions. So you can put in the blood pressure, maybe 80 to 120 or something like that. Breaths per minute, the range you can put in maybe 40 to 60, weight 150 to 155. So you can put in whatever items you'd wish to indicate here. Medication changes, significant lab findings. I'm going to choose yes to go ahead and include the services performed during this visit based on the orders that were entered for the patient. Now I'm on my last page, so it goes to check completion and it finishes. If I'd like, I could print this to see what it looks like, but I'm just going to go ahead and submit this assessment to the back office. I cannot sign it yet because it has not been validated. So I'll go ahead and submit it. I don't have any fatal inconsistencies, so I'll go ahead and click OK to submit it to the back office. Has been submitted successfully. And we'll check what remains to be done. The worker in the back office is going to validate the assessment. So I'll switch back to Johnny Worker, Clinical, Documents Owned by Office. And here I see the discharge assessment for Johnny Medicare. So I'm going to go ahead and validate this assessment. And as a result of validating the assessment, the patient's status has changed from admit to discharged. As you can see, the status shows up here as discharged. Now, if I'd like, I could switch back to our worker, Randy Drawn, and I should find the assessment in my submitted documents list view. There it is, the discharge assessment that's unsigned. I can go ahead and sign that if I wish. So I'll click Sign Assessment. And sign as Randy Drawn, RN. All right, returning to our list of tasks to cover in the training. We've completed the document to the discharge assessment. We've submitted it and signed it. Now we're going to go ahead and perform the final claims processing for this patient. So we'll go back to the back office and we'll go to the main patient menu for Johnny Medicare. And let's go ahead and see if there are any issues that might prevent the claims processing from being performed. So I'll click on the billing integrity. And I see several errors and several warnings. Now, the warnings will not prevent me from processing my claims, but these are things I might want to be aware of. Let's start first with the errors. I see that I have a 45 that has not been signed by the physician, and I also see that I have no face-to-face encounter date or signed receive date for the face-to-face encounter. So let's go ahead and take care of those 3 errors first, and then we'll come back to this list momentarily. In order to track the dates of the physician's signature and the face-to-face encounter, we can go to View Docs. It'll show us a list of all the documents for this patient, including the start of care and 45. And on the same row, you'll see the tracking link. I'll click on that. It'll bring up a series of dates. So let's go ahead and set the perhaps the fax sent date as today. It could be the mail date if it was mailed. By the way, if you use the built-in fax facility in CarePortal, it will automatically stamp the fax sent date here. We can put in the received from physician or physician signed date. This is the most critical one that is preventing the claim from going through, because the physician has to sign the 45 and it has to be registered before the claim can be processed. Otherwise, if a particular 45 or supplemental order is not required or a signature is not required, you can go ahead and override that by selecting the checkbox that says physician signature not required for claims. That would be especially pertinent for non-Medicare claims, for example. I'm going to go ahead and click today for signature received from physician. And let's also include the physician face-to-face encounter date. Let's put that on the 6th, for example. And maybe the signed receive date for the face-to-face encounter. We'll put today's date in there. Both of these are required for a start of care episode. So I'm going to save back. And that sets my 45 status as complete. Alright, so I'm going to go back. And if we've done everything correctly, we should see there are no more errors in the list. So I'm going to check billing integrity again. Alright, so all I have left are warnings. It's telling me that I processed my wrap today, and it's probably a good idea to wait for some time before I process the final claim, but I'm going to go ahead and ignore that for now. Medicare eligibility has not been checked. Now that's fine because this is a bogus patient or a sample patient. It's also informing me that I had specified 9 therapy visits in M2200 and I only put in 1 therapy visit. Now in this particular episode, the episode was shortened, so that's just the way it is, but in some cases you may want to know this so that you can finalize all of the therapy visits in the system without inadvertently forgetting to include them all in CarePortal. Here's one that's interesting. Now, recall when we started the start of care assessment, there was a checkbox that says include supplies in claim. I did not check that checkbox initially, and I did go ahead and add supplies to the episode. So now it's complaining and saying, hey, well, you didn't originally choose that, but you eventually put in some billable supplies, so the HIPS code that you submitted to the state indicates there were no supplies, but now you've put supplies in. So you either need to remove the supplies or retroactively change the setting to tell Medicare that you were going to bill supplies after all. So it's telling us the way to do that is to go to Manage Assessments and select the Require Supplies in Claim for that episode. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to click back, and in the patient console we see Manage Assessments, and so we see there's a start of care assessment here that begins our episode, and there's an option here to say Require Supplies in Claim. We're going to go ahead and check that. By the way, there are a lot of other features in this Manage Assessments. One that you may be aware of is that if you accidentally delete an assessment for any reason, you can always come back and undelete it by selecting the checkbox here for undelete. If it's If it's been deleted, you'll find it in the list and it will show a checkbox that says unchecked for undeleted assessment. So you go ahead and check that and it restores that assessment back to the way it was before you deleted it. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save now that I've required supplies and claim. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. It's just giving me a warning that it's already been billed, but that's fine. So now we're going to go back to our billing integrity to see if that warning has gone away regarding the supplies. And sure enough, there's no more warnings regarding the supplies. And these warnings that we have left over are okay. We're going to go ahead and process the claim in spite of these warnings. So let's go back home and go to billing and claims to be billed. All dates. And let's show just the finals this time. And now we see if we scroll down, we'll find patient Medicare. Johnny Medicare is in our final claims list. And I'm going to go ahead and choose to include this episode in the claims processing. Notice I've got 3 warnings. If I choose to include it, those warnings will be shown to me again. And I can go ahead and click OK to go ahead and accept that final claim. All right, and so now I'm going to come up and use my one-click Submit Medicare Claims method. And once I've successfully submitted the final claim, I'll see that claim in this batch, and I'm able to pull up the UBO for it any time by clicking on the attachment here. And so I don't need to actually save my claim or print it off to a separate location. I can always refer back to it from this particular claim batch log. And I can also go into it and see the details of what was submitted. If I'd like, I can also put notes regarding the claim. For example, if there was an ADR or if it was rejected by Medicare for any reason, I can put notes in regarding the situation. If I like, I can also go to the actual patient in clinical and go to the claims area. So I scroll down and I go into the financial claims, and I can see a history of the ledger regarding what has happened. So the RAP was billed on 12/26. The amount was $1853.96. And the final claim was $1235.94, which is the 40%, and this is the 60%. This ends session number 2 for Medicare claims processing and clinical flow processing. Thank you for your attention.